The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. Today is a lot of special episode, special guest, Joe Giacalone from True Crime with the Sarge, that you can find on YouTube. I first met Joe at Crimecon Orlando, and I soon became a huge fan of his. I pop in regularly to True Crime with the Sarge, and I love his no-nonsense insight into cases. I have learned a lot from this man. His guests are also amazing, and I appreciate all the expertise. So Joe is a retired New York Police Department sergeant, an SDS, a supervisor detective squad, and a respected expert in crime investigation, cold cases, and he's been training the next generation of investigators. He has served on the BTK Serial Killer Task Force, a team that would capture one of the country's most elusive serial killers, responsible for a string of 10 murders. Now, Joe has also written 2 highly regarded books. Of course, I have to talk about the books that are used in police departments and criminal justice programs. The Criminal Investigative Function, a guide for new investigators, and the Cold Case Handbook, which I personally own, both published by Blue 360 Media. And let's see, Joseph is also an adjunct professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, a position that he's held for like 20 years. This guy is good. He's good. He teaches criminal courses in criminal investigation, cold case analysis, and other specialized topics, drawing directly from his professional experience. He has a master's in criminal justice with a concentration in crime and deviance from John Jay College. Now, you have probably also seen Joe Giacalone on media reports, adding his expert commentary to criminal cases. So now I'd like to welcome Joe Giacalone to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Jill. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I don't know if you realize, first time I met you was at Crimecon Orlando.
Okay, so we're going back a few years now.
Right. And I'd heard the name, got to see your face. I think it was my first time on Creators Row, but I have been following you and been a fan ever since.
Well, that's nice of you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I'm really thrilled that you're here. It's this is like one of my dreams come true. Thank you.
Oh, there you go. This is, I was looking forward to this. When you invited me, I was like, yes, this is going to be fun.
So I want to ask you, it's been a while since I've done a Long Island serial killer update. I feel like there's just so much going on, a lot of moving pieces. What's going on? Go for it, man.
So, yeah, there is a tremendous amount of things going on. But I think the most important part of it, I think we just rewind the people back just a little bit, probably around April or March of last year, when the defense had put out the motion to have the evidence thrown out, the DNA, and all the different things to it. And this was the battleground right then and there, that if the defense was fortunate enough to have the new technology of the DNA thrown out, you lose basically 6 of the 7 cases right off the bat. So I had anticipated that the judge would allow the DNA to be in for that reason. I mean, everyone understands the gravity of this case and the situation. But New York only became the 3rd state in the union that allows this new DNA technology to be used for court purposes. So it opens up a wide door. And it also opens up the ability of the district attorney, Ray Tierney, and also the defense, Michael Brown, to become like the experts in this situation. So going forward, it's going to be interesting to see how this propels their career. Win, lose, or draw, they had to learn all about this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something I've learned right now. You always hear about DNA. I just assumed, wrongly, that it's just a kind of a given, that it comes with it. Now I'm finding out it really has to be kind of tested.
Well, what makes this different is that because the DNA is so old and it's been degraded, so they have to basically rebuild these things, and they use these things called SNPs. And I'm not an expert in the whole biology part of it, but just from what I understand, tangentially, it becomes a big deal because they're using techniques that haven't been used before. Just as like if the crime happened today, they would use a different technique. So
Gotcha.
The ability to be able to replicate the DNA so they can use it for testing and all the other things that go along with it. And especially if you're dealing with the difference between mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA. And like I teach my students all the time, just remember, M for mitochondrial, M for mom. It's only derived from mom. And that's an important aspect, but you're only getting half the picture. So it's important to see how this plays out. But I think the prosecution's case regarding that is going to be fine.
Good. I'm relieved to hear that. I've followed serial killer cases, I think, since I was a tween. I don't think that was a word when I was a tween. But this one was kind of close to my heart. I'm a retired teacher and I taught psychology. And one of the things I did with the kids, in New Jersey, they would take the AP exam the beginning of May and graduation's the end of June. Now what do you do with them? Well, you investigate serial killers. And this case popped up and it was kind of local. I'm in New Jersey. It's only Long Island. So I had spent a lot of time reading everything I could get my hands on, every newspaper article, every book that would eventually come out. So this has been something I've had my eye on for a very, very long time.
Yeah, well, speaking of somewhat parallel, I've been teaching for a long time too in the college level. And one of the classes I've been teaching is the investigation class. And every semester for a couple of semesters leading up to 2023, the term project was, who is the Long Island serial killer? List all the things and this and that. And what was really, for me, fun or exciting, I guess, was that after the arrest was made in, July of 2023 or June, I got emails from students that I hadn't spoken to in years and saying, hey, well, I remember doing this term project and this was, and here it is, and it was actually is kind of cool.
I did too. I got the same emails. I've kept my same email from, 25 years ago. And I got emails from students who were like, hey, do you remember we covered this? I'm like, do I remember we covered this? Yes, I do. It was the coolest thing. That's so funny.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that makes teaching worthwhile.
Yes. There's a lot of things that I really wonder about, but we digress. All right. So they've had a million court dates and hearings. Mm-hmm. Kind of what's next?
Well, the defense has had 3 major setbacks already. So they lost the DNA, they lost the ability to break up the cases. And, and now they lost the latest one, which had to deal with they didn't bring up the change of venue. They didn't do that. And I'll explain why they didn't do that. But, the issue that comes down to is the defense has a huge mountain to climb. And they want to be able to, try to create that reasonable doubt. But there is a mountain of evidence, not only just forensics, but it's the digital forensics and the crime scene stuff that they have, and the hair follicles from the wife and the daughter that matches victims that were found in various places, including all the way out now in Suffolk County, way out with the Sandra Castilla case out in Southampton. So the defense try to make that like kind of go away in respect that basically like saying, hey, the wind must have blown the hair over there. So yeah, they have a real problem.
I think they do. I read the affidavit, I guess, that came out, and the things that he was Googling and searching online.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Is revolting. Listen, I knew this guy was, whoever it was, allegedly Rex, was bad. I really didn't realize how bad. It's revolting.
Yeah. And if anybody hasn't read it yet, it's called the superseding indictment. If you just Google it, Rex Heuermann superseding indictment, you can read, just some of the things that they put in there. Because I believe, if I recall correctly, at the press conference, the district attorney, Ray Tierney, had said that they included the ones that they could. So there is a whole bunch of other searches and things that he was looking for that they couldn't even put into print. So you couple that with, thousands of images that they said they have recovered. We don't know if those images were photos taken by him or photos that he downloaded off the internet. But whatever those may be, is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out in court. But unfortunately, we, the public, won't get a chance to see that because it's not going to be televised. New York State has historically not allowed cameras in the courtroom, and I don't think they're going. The judge can make a decision, but I don't think he will.
I'm disappointed because I would have been riveted to this. Podcast would have come to a screeching halt, and I just would have sat there transfixed. I like cameras in the courtroom. I do, because you can hear it for yourself, and I don't have to rely on somebody else telling me what was said. You can get a transcript later, but that's not the easiest process necessarily either. And how long do you think this trial is going to take?
Well, it's funny you brought that up because Josh Seaman, you know who he is, right? He's the the producer of The Killing Season. We were doing a show the other day and we were discussing just that, and we figured that this would take a couple of months just from the amount of evidence and this and that. But when the last appearance that Rex had was about, I guess about 2 weeks ago now or so, one of the reporters, Laura Engel, had asked the district attorney, how long you think this is going to be? And he said only a couple of weeks, which then further fueled the speculation that there could possibly be a plea deal on the table, right? Because that's the major thing that's running around now, because you look at how much evidence that they have to go through in this case. You have 7 victims that he's been charged with murder for. You have the new DNA technology. You have all these experts that are going to be coming in and battling this out. You figure that this is going to take quite a long time, but he was pretty confident. He said only a couple of weeks. I mean, I think it's going to take him a couple of weeks just to pick a jury, for crying out loud.
Yeah. Because who hasn't heard? Who hasn't heard about this case?
Right. And now that you bring that up, right? Because remember, I said before, they haven't asked for a change of venue because it benefits the defense not to, because it's so difficult to not have a Long Islander that didn't know either A, about this case, the corruption that was going on in Suffolk County between then Police Chief James Burke, the corruption of the district attorney. All of those things play in the defense's favor. Having the FBI removed from the task force and all the different things and all the missteps that happen during this investigation that only helps the defense. So to me, that's my opinion, of course, is the reason why they never asked for a change of venue.
That actually makes sense to me, because that was a mess. I did Kolker's book, Lost Girls. That's where my first delve into that. And terrific book, which is why I picked that book. It was so good. But I also read 3 other books and watched every documentary. But I followed up and reported on Thomas Spoda and McPartland and all of that was went on, and how it took 3 years to get sentencing. And I mean, it was just, what a circus. It was just absolutely unbelievable. And how is that not going to help the defense?
Yeah, it's going to.
What else have they got?
I mean, not only the dysfunction, but the corruption and the allegations of, James Burke being involved in all these rings and all the other craziness that goes on, and the pure speculation from the new media, let's call it that way, right? The true crime people and everything else that goes along with it. It only, helps the defense, because there's jurors that are going to be in those rooms looking to get on this jury who feel certain ways about what transpired over the last, 15 years now. So it's really going to be interesting to see how that plays out and how they choose the jurors. Like I said, I think that takes a long time to do, because they're going to be knocking people out left and right.
It's going to be something. Going back in the day before a suspect had been arrested, we had Peaches and her toddler who were mixed into this, not knowing if they were involved. So you've just seen that go off in its own direction, that it was the ex-husband.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because something else that plays in the defense's favor, right? So you have this man, Andrew Dykes, who was arrested for killing Peaches, who was Tanya Jackson. And yes. Tanya and Andrew had a daughter, Tatiana, and her remains were found out in Gilgo, not too far from the remains, I believe it was Valerie Mack, if I remember correctly. It's either Jessica Taylor or Valerie Mack, within 100 and something feet, which, becomes another odd point, right? I mean, at this whole thing, because some of Tanya's remains were found at the Jones Beach, which became the furthest west point of human remains, and Tatiana became the furthest east.
Right.
So they acted as bookends. So myself included in that, figured that all these cases are together. And when you look at what has now transpired since that case has, quote unquote, broken open, and they arrested Andrew Dykes, there are some glaring, I'm not going to say discrepancies, but holes. And what do I mean? The Nassau County Police Department dropped an arrest warrant to get Andrew Dykes out of Florida.
Okay.
And when they had the presser, not only did they have the presser when they identified Tanya and Tatiana, there wasn't a representative of Suffolk County there. Now, remember, they have half of this case. They have Tatiana's.
Right.
There wasn't anybody there. When the arrest came down, Suffolk County did not add an arrest warrant for Tatiana. I mean, this 1.5-year-old didn't walk herself out to, Gilgo Beach.
Right.
She was left there. Either she was already gone or she was left there to die. And now publicly, the district attorney out there is saying we don't have evidence of murder, right? We you basically, but you can't say, well, we know it is murder, but you have to be able to prove. Suffolk County didn't put the arrest paperwork in. So you're seeing this from what from an outsider's point of view, like there's something wrong between what's going on, what transpired between Nassau in this case and Suffolk case, because it is going to make the district attorney's job in Suffolk, Ray Tierney's job, more difficult, because not only did you introduce this now red herring into the case, but then the district attorney in Nassau County, Ann Donnelly, throws out, well, there's like basically several serial killers. Gilgo's a great place to dump bodies. And pretty much, I mean, that's sum and substance, but that's pretty much what she said, like almost word for word. And I cannot imagine that would have made Ray Tierney happy to hear that, because if anybody who's been following this case as much as I have, or Josh has had over the years, there was another such incident that was really close to what Ann Donnelly says, and that was from then District Attorney Tom Spoda. And it might have been around 2011 or 2010. I don't know the year, but there was a public feud between him and the police commissioner, who was named Richard Dormer at the time, about how many serial killers were responsible for all these victims on Gilgo Beach. Richard Dormer, the police commissioner, said that there was one, and Tom Spoda said there's like maybe 3 or 4, right? I mean, so remember, if you're the defense, all you have to do is plant a reasonable doubt in one person's head, and you get yourself a hung jury. And this is something that's really concerning to me, that this stuff is coming out now, because I guarantee you it's a headache that Ray Tierney didn't want.
Oh, no. He's dealing with 7 victims. The last thing he needs are question marks popping up from people who are supposed to know and are in the business with him.
I'm sure he was consulted, and I'm sure he said, you have to do this now. Maybe we could build a case so that we can arrest him for Tatiana also. I can't imagine them doing it. And so, I look at that case and say, well, why did Nassau move right this moment? And I can't really figure out a reason why. From a law enforcement perspective, the only reason why you'd want to go out and scoop somebody off the street is if that you feel that he's going to harm somebody else, and we need to get him off the street. But from what it appears, this guy, I think he worked even in law enforcement in Tennessee, and he's got this Army background. He's got all these different things going on, and it doesn't appear that he was a threat to the public. So I didn't know what the rush was all about. And to me, and this is my opinion, folks, the case against Andrew Dykes is pretty weak. I mean, here you have a man and a woman who have a child in common, who they have, this on again, off again relationship, but they apparently got together and, had a sexual relationships, and DNA was left behind. And then he leaves, supposedly, while she's alive, right? And then all of a sudden she winds up in a Rubbermaid bin, and, her remains are found scattered. I think the defense is going to be like, listen, there's so many people that, have relationships like this, and every now and then they get together and these things do happen. But when he left, she was alive. Well, they're going to say, well, why did you lie about having relationships with him? Because the defense is going to say, well, because look at the position he's in now. You guys wouldn't believe him. And here we are. And they didn't do a probable cause affidavit on this because it was done through a grand jury. So he was indicted through a grand jury. To me, this is a weak case.
Oh, boy. Tell me they're not going to try that case at the same time that Rex is going to hit trial, because that would just be too much.
You're dealing with 2 different counties, and so we're going to see where it ends up on the docket. So it's not going to be, it's not something that you can say to yourself, well, we're going to hold off on this one. I mean, if the defense says, listen, we're ready for trial, And if I'm the defense, I'm going to do this on purpose to try to get this thing around September when because September 26th, they've been given a hard date because Judge Mazie said, come hell or high water, we're doing this in September, right after Labor Day.
Yeah.
So they have no choice. So if I'm, the defense for Andrew Dykes, I'm going to try to keep this thing going up until a certain point to say, okay, we're ready. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised, Jill, if we see come May or June, the defense for Andrew Dykes come out and say, we're ready to go to trial. We want to go right now. That's just a guess, but let's just see what happens.
Well, if you're a defense attorney and in your opinion, it's a weak case, why would you dither around in case more evidence pops up? All right, let's do it.
Well, yeah, this is the problem with this case, right? There isn't any other kind of evidence that you're dealing with. You're dealing with semen that was recovered from inside of the victim. And, that's it. We're not talking about hair follicles. We're not talking about anything else. We're not talking about eyewitness accounts. This is all they have. And I've seen cases with even more forensic evidence not get prosecuted because they say these things do happen.
Yeah, they do.
It's not a good position to be in. And like I said, I can't imagine Ray Tierney being too excited about what transpired at Nassau. I really can't. I'm not, as an observer. As an observer, I'm saying, like, why now? What did you do? Sometimes, Jill, in law enforcement, the public's going, hurry up, you're not moving fast enough. What's the holdup? And then you do something and then they turn around and go, well, what did you do? Right? And I think this is the epitome of a situation like that.
I mean, I'm a layperson and I know you have to let the evidence tell the story. If you have the evidence, you've done your investigation, you've crossed your T's, dotted your I's, you let the investigation push. I can appreciate public pressure, and Lord knows we've all got opinions on everything today and how we feel about everything. But good heavens, that doesn't sound like there's a lot of, something was off. I don't want to speculate on what people were thinking.
The only thing that could help the case, and I've said this publicly before, but we have yet to hear any answers, and that is, was he under court obligation to pay child support? Or was he paying child support? We do know that he was paying for her rent and the apartment. Did that stop like shortly after she disappeared? Because if that's the case, like say he was under court order and she disappeared in June and in July he just said, I'm not paying anymore. To me, that would be a much stronger case now. But
that's a red flag, yeah.
Right. We haven't been able to confirm nor deny that. So, that's, and of course, remember, the police and the prosecutor knows a lot more information than we do, and they cannot tell everybody what's going on because they're not allowed to by law.
Right. Well, I'm going to hope for a lot more information than we know and that the case is solid and everything goes forward because, it was a travesty just trying to get Tanya and Tatiana their names back took all of these many years. The poor woman was dismembered, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I do remember a big kind of debate on whether the intact bodies versus dismembered bodies were two different MOs, two different serial killers. I always thought it was one guy.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I floated this theory a long time ago, and I got pushed back a long time ago. And I said it was one serial killer from the beginning, but we had, people who were FBI profilers and everybody else saying, oh, there's more than one, blah, 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 blah. And up until, Tatiana and Tanya, it was one person. I mean, they had found DNA that from victims who were dismembered, and they found DNA from victims who were intact. So it goes to show you that, yes, we do know for a fact that serial killers change their MOs. They change the way they do things. They learn from it. And anybody who's seen Rex Heuermann's planning document knows that he was not only changing, he was reading Mindhunter, he was learning, he was doing things to try to prevent law enforcement from identifying him, even though he's made mistakes, right? Because nothing's perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect crime. There's a thing about, evidence and all the other things that we have to consider in order to make arrests, but, no such thing as a perfect crime. If you're a suspect, that it wasn't a perfect crime. But when you're dealing with a situation such as this, where you have somebody who is evolving, you have to remember there was a time when he was picking these women up off the street. Mm-hmm. And somebody might have seen him pick them up on the street and might have been able to give a description. I mean, he's a very big man. He's got features that people wouldn't forget, or that big green truck that he was driving, right? So there was a reason, in my opinion, the reason why I went with the one serial killer theory was because he was dismembering those women so that it made it difficult for law enforcement to identify them, right? Creating these forensic countermeasures. And for a long time, it worked. And then the other girls that were found intact, like the Gilgo Four, Melissa and Megan and Maureen, and those were left intact because he found those women online. There was no observation. Nobody's going to see him do this, right? He was using burner phones. He was meeting in these, no-tell motels, so to speak. So the likelihood of being observed with one of these women was very low. So,
see, I thought something different. I thought he started out dismembering to, again, prevent identification, to make it even difficult to find them. And that went on for a while as he's evolving, reading, and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But no one caught on. So it's like, why am I doing all of this? Dismembering body parts. This has got to be a mess. I don't have to be messy. I don't have to do this anymore. And you throw in the double blind with having this happening on the internet versus going and picking them up somewhere. I don't have to do this anymore. At some point, they did find some remains I remember hearing about, but then the rest of them weren't. But I just thought he got, hey, you know what? This is a lot of work and risk at the same time that I don't have to take. That was my theory.
And a very likely one at that, right? Unfortunately, television kind of messes up with a lot of people, and they think that, dismembering a body is kind of easy. It's not. Not at all. And it's not done for a variety of reasons, and one of them is because of that. It's just, as simple as that. I mean, they never found the skull of Tanya Jackson. And if they do, in fact, have the right man in Andrew Dykes, maybe they can discuss a little bit of a remedy here, or maybe they can save him some time if he can give that up, so to speak.
Yeah.
We shall see how that plays out. I'm very concerned about that case.
Yes, I understand. I'm with you on that. You mentioned the idea of a Rex plea deal floating around there.
Yes.
Dear Lord, if there is a Lord in this universe, can part of the plea deal be you have to explain yourself? Kohlberger drove me crazy.
No. Yeah, no, they have no leverage. See, Jill, this is why, this is going to be controversial, but this is why I am for having death penalty statutes. Now,
ding, 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 ding.
Yes. Before the anti-death penalty statutes start yelling and screaming at me through the other end of their microphone, just hear me out for a second. I'm not saying that we want to have the death penalty so we can execute as many people as possible. No. It is a leverage tool. Even the worst of the worst, when faced with the termination of their own life, tend to want to make a deal. And hanging that over somebody's head, a guy like Rex, who's got kids, who's got a life, this is something where you could say, okay, we'll take this off the table, but you have to talk. If you're not going to talk, we're going full boat into this. And the last presser, one of the reporters asked Ray Tierney about if this case has a chance of going federal. And he kind of double blinked and triple blinked at the time. He says he doesn't think, because right now there's no federal nexus. You're right, there isn't. But if once this case is over and the DNA sample goes into CODIS, because it's not in there yet, people think it's in CODIS. It's not. New York State does not allow that until conviction.
Yes.
It's already then too late, because you want to be able to do this now. And that's why even I think Nevada, for Las Vegas Police Department, they were either threatening to sue or they filed a lawsuit against New York to get the DNA to test it against some of their cases. And it's been a fight. And you kind of just scratch your head. And for those listeners who are interested in why this is, in 2013, there's a Supreme Court decision called Maryland versus King. And Maryland versus King, the Supreme Court says that law enforcement can take DNA upon arrest, and that it is no different than taking fingerprints or photographs. I think it was Antonin Scalia was actually, sum and substance, that was his quote. So law enforcement can take the DNA and put it into the system without waiting for a conviction. But states like New York and other big states said, no, we're still waiting for conviction. I can understand New York's position. And the position, New York is a very liberal state, and it worries about the privacy and everything of everybody else. But also the flip side of that is the state is so big, and you have a place like New York City where a lot of the arrests emanate from. The system would get jammed up with DNA samples from people and the cost of taking these samples and storing them. So I can understand it on this, as the whole, right? Even though I don't agree with it, I understand it.
I didn't even consider the practical implications of that. But like you, I'm like, if there's people out there that shouldn't be doing what they're doing, and you can use that DNA, use it. I was the first member of my family to upload my DNA, and my brother was like, well, I don't think I want to do that. And I'm like, too late.
Yeah, too late.
You did some misspent thing in your youth. It's too late. We're already out there. Because I just wanted to, God, if there's a limb on my tree that I'm not aware of, please hack it off. Like, yeah.
That's what a lot of people don't understand. Like, I have never submitted my DNA, not because I'm worried about anything, but I just haven't done it. And people say, well, aren't you interested in where you're from? I'm like, I'm from Brooklyn. That's where I'm from. I can tell you my parents' names if that helps. But the issue that comes down to is I'm not that interested. And, for some people, I think it's great, building out their tree and doing the family history, and it helps with health reasons and all the other things. That's great. I'm just me personally not into it. But if I reached out to my cousins and stuff like that, I guarantee you somebody's already done this anyway. So like you said, Jill, it doesn't really matter at that point if you put yours in. What the system lacks is some of the ethnic groups. It lacks, Asian and Hispanic and African American, because it's overpopulated with Caucasians and Europeans and everything like that. So, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we have another victim on Gilgo, Asian male doe.
Right.
Who now Othram has publicly stated, Othram and members too is also the ones that identified Tatiana and Tanya Jackson. But Othram has publicly stated that they are working on Asian male doe to try to find out his identity. So, and then they had the just recent announcement out of Suffolk County about the, I always say this word wrong, microbial. I usually call it microbial, but microbial DNA is going to be used to try to help determine the estimated time of death. It's about using microbes and other germs to help identify a possible time of death, which then could put investigators on a specific trail about maybe where this man's from. But even Othram has publicly stated that Asian representation in these DNA databases is so small, it makes identification a long and basically arduous task. So,
yeah.
That's something to do. So, and the reason why I had David Mattelman on my show, and, he said that basically because the records they keep for genealogy purposes, and it's basically like a learned thing. They're taught from they're very young to learn their whole family tree and know everybody in there. So there's no reason to do what us Americans are trying to do.
Right. To go back and trace everybody. Yes. Yeah. My husband's Native American, and you're right. Step it up. Crimes happen in these communities. Come on, people.
Well, especially with Native Americans, we're struggling mightily with getting even reporting done for missing persons and homicide victims. And, the FBI is in charge of collecting that data, and they haven't been given enough information or been cooperating with some of the local tribes and authorities to try to get this information to get it into the system. But there is a huge problem happening right now in American Indian populations in regard to missing persons and sexual assaults and homicides, and we don't even have the data to even help. It's absolutely crazy. It's a national emergency as far as I'm concerned about what's going on.
Yes, it really is. That's why I made him. I said, yep, I'm doing it. Spit in the tube. Let's go. We're sending it in. And he was like, all right. Now, I haven't looked recently, but he didn't have a whole lot of information. They tried. So people, come on, go get your kids. Spit in a tube. Do it. I want to say, too, Paul Holes told me this. He said, make sure people understand that no one is actually messing with their DNA, that they produce a digital DNA strand that's unique to whomever. Let's say it's me. And it's not that people are fiddling with the biological matter. They're fiddling with this digital DNA. It's digital. It's
and it doesn't go into
letters.
CODIS either. It doesn't go into CODIS either. That's a big fear that everyone else has. It's closed-ended. It does not go into CODIS. Hey, here's a trivia question for everybody out there. What does CODIS stand for? I'll let you could take a brief second out of your podcast and go look it up, and then you come back and we'll tell you the answer at the end of the show.
End of the show. We'll make them wait. I think I know, but I'm not going to say. Matt?
Yeah, there's so many things. There's so many working parts in this case. Like I said, I'm excited about hearing about the forensics and the DNA because I want to see how that plays out because it affects cases nationwide. I also wanted, of course, Asian male doe is the priority on this. We have Karen Bagata, who was identified a couple of years ago, who has not been tied to anybody in this. So that case is still pending on trying to see who was responsible for her death. And of course, there are several other cases that are open, missing persons and homicide cases in Suffolk County that may or may not be involved in this whole circle. But there is another red herring that the defense has in their favor that we didn't mention. I had mentioned the victim's name before, Sandra Castilla. Originally was thought to have been killed by a man named John Bitroff, who was convicted of killing Rita Tangredi and Colleen McNamee. I think it was in 2017. And from 2017 on, both the district attorney, Tom Spoda, and I think the ADA, his name was Biancalava, or something similar to that, had stated that he could be even responsible, meaning John Bitroff could be responsible for Gilgo victims. That's going to come back and haunt District Attorney Ray Tierney. And also, Tom Spoda was pretty adamant to say that the death of Sandra Castilla, the murder of Sandra Castilla, was related to both Rita and Colleen, saying basically that we know John Bitroff did it, but we just can't prove it. And that becomes another problem because here, right in the middle between when Rita was killed and Colleen was killed, right in the middle of that, within a short distance from where the other two victims were found, we get the death of Sandra Castilla, who has now been tied to Rex Heuermann via DNA for a hair follicle found. So this becomes another headache for the district attorney, Ray Tierney. So it's as much as evidence as he has, the videos, the images and the cell phone records and the burner phones and the DNA and all these things that he has going in his favor, it's not going to be clear sailing.
Yes. Have to ask you this. Why did Rex keep all those burner phones?
Yeah, he's a pack rat, apparently.
Yeah.
He's a pack rat. Yeah, and for somebody who was writing documents about getting rid of gloves and getting rid of these things, all these other items, basically to avoid detection, he made several mistakes. I mean, he kept, I think it was 50 hotel keys, the little cards that you get now. So are those considered souvenirs for him? Could he not just help himself? But it helps the prosecution. And there's one thing that we don't know much about that is highly been speculated about, and that was he has maybe 2 storage facilities that were uncovered. We know one for sure.
Oh, I did not know that.
That they executed a search warrant on and then called the Suffolk County medical examiner to it.
I didn't know that either.
Which was an interesting little tidbit there. I think they realized they made a mistake after the fact. When I was doing cold cases and we would do either a dig or do a search like this, we had a team of people already there representing them. So when the media was watching us, the Emmy or a representative, an MLI, a medical legal investigator, was already there so that, people would say, well, they're already there. So, it's not like it's a big surprise, but calling the Emmy and then seeing the Emmy show up created a poop storm. Let's just put it that way. Speculation. Yeah. Of speculation and everything else about what could have been possibly in that storage facility that you would need the medical examiner for. To me, I thought it would have been even more curious if it was a forensic anthropologist instead of a medical examiner, because the anthropologist studies the bones and those kind of things, right? And we know he's a hunter. So if they found bones, it could have been animal bones too, because we know he's a hunter. I mean, he's got all these guns, he's got all these photos of him duck hunting and everything else that goes along with it. So that would have been an interesting little tidbit there.
The case that keeps giving.
Yeah, it's a really interesting case. This is going to become a textbook case. It is going to be probably New York's biggest case, even more so than, Son of Sam, because a lot of people now, generations really don't know who Son of Sam is, and, unless they watch the Netflix show, but they really don't know who David Berkowitz is and what was going on. He was terrorizing New York City in 1977, 1978. I mean, I was a kid growing up through that, and I remember my dad had to go to Manhattan for something, and I was very worried about him, here I think I was like 8 years old or 7 years old, and all this stuff was going on because I remember, seeing the front pages of the Daily News about 44 caliber killer, and it was a bizarre time to be living.
I remember thinking, I'm so glad I'm blonde.
Yeah,
and then he got Stacy Moskowitz, who was blonde. But But I remember thinking, I'm glad I'm in New Jersey. I'm glad I'm blonde. And yeah, that's a case that people should look up. I have to do a book on it.
Well, yes, it's an interesting case for a variety of reasons, but just from the historical context and about learning about these guys, it's an important one.
Yeah, absolutely. That went on for over a year too, 76 into 77.
I mean, and Rex with Mindhunter, John Douglas's book, I mean, he's following things kind of in order. He's covering his tracks, so to speak. And he was doing searches for John Bitroff, in his Google things. He was keeping articles. He did everything that, John Douglas said that serial killers do. They get themselves involved in the investigation. They, maybe even hang out in cop bars. I mean, he lived around the corner from the Nassau County Police Academy. And, a lot of people don't know that, but the Nassau County Police Academy at the time was in Massapequa Park, literally like 2 blocks away. So we don't know if or any relationships that he had with any of the people in and around that area. I mean, you're going to run into these cops all the time. I mean, they're there. So that would be a little interesting little tidbit and sidelight about how serial killers interact with law enforcement, whether a case is still happening, right? Nobody knows who they are yet. But he kept newspaper clippings. He kept, his Google searches were quite interesting and also quite frightening. If you leave out the Google searches that are the frightening ones and you look at the interesting ones, like looking at other serial killers and different ways of doing things, that's interesting, right? You're getting into the mindset and the behavioral aspects of this man. I find that interesting. And
that's my fascination.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting aspect of it because, we, the public, haven't seen any of the crime scene photos, and we probably never will. They'll show them in court, but the behavioral analysis and the behavioral clues inside those crime scene photos could also lay in a little bit of insight into who the killer is inside of his own mind.
Exactly.
There's so many working parts to this case. And, listen, right now he has got another court case on March 17th. So it's about another motion. And like I said, the judge has already said basically, okay, enough with the motions kind of things because you're going in September. So this probably will be the last motion we see up until trial. And I just, it's going to be an important one to see exactly what transpires in that one. But to answer the trivia question that I had said before, so CODIS stands for Combined DNA Index System. So basically there are 2 systems within CODIS. We have the forensic database, which is the unknown samples that we have. So you find a DNA at a crime scene and you put it into the system and it comes back to no hit. It goes in the forensic database. And of course, we have the known database, the people who have been convicted and have a DNA sample put into it. So that's the answer to the trivia question.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I had one of the letters wrong I was searching for, but yeah, it's not obvious CODIS. I'm sorry. Some of them are pretty obvious, but CODIS was a little tougher to keep track of the phraseology there.
Yes. It's part of, the FBI runs it. And, it's part of their next generation identification thing. They renamed everything, AFIS, the automated fingerprint identification system's now been incorporated in this. They're making a mess out of the whole alphabet soup, but it's kind of interesting to see how this develops over the next few years because I still think we're in about a 2-inning of a 9-inning ball game about how much forensics is going to do.
Well, we shall see. It's going to be fluid. And hey, Joe, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been so enlightening for me.
Anytime, Jill. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, this case, I think it's, like I said, this is going to be one for the record books.
Absolutely. I have to squeeze you in again when something exciting goes down and you have to come back.
Sure. No problem.
Oh, by the way, I do have your cold case handbook.
Oh, great.
And I think it's genius. It is on my murder shelf. I do refer to it when I'm reading things and have to look up something. And it's like, there it is. It's always there. The information I need. So I highly recommend it to people, especially like lay people like me who are not investigators.
It's good to know, that book, I wrote it for basically 3 different audiences. I wrote it for law enforcement. I wrote it for, the media, and I wrote it for the family. So there's a lot of different aspects that people can pull out of that can help them while they're doing these kind of cases.
Yeah. And I just needed to know more to do what I do. You have to know something. May not know everything, but have to know something. So that's why I bought it. And it's been helpful. Very helpful.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And everybody, check out True Crime with the Sarge. Talk about True Crime with the Sarge.
Sure. I have a YouTube channel, True Crime with the Sarge, and I also was recently launched True Crime with the Sarge the audio files, which is found on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to in there. They're basically different shows that I do on the live show. So it's, you can head over to YouTube or you can head over to Apple or Spotify and you can listen to some of the latest shows that we put on, but, from a variety of topics. But, like everybody else, I do get into sometimes active cases, but I pretty much go through some of the old cases and we speak to forensic scientists and forensic psychologists, and we try to get into the nitty gritty of these things. So when they do happen, we have a little bit of better understanding of who or what we might be looking for.
Yep, exactly. So I pop in as often as I can. You see me in the chat, like waving to people and all. It's a great group of people. So highly recommend it, Murder Bookies. Make sure you go and check out True Crime with the Sarge.
Thanks a lot, Joe.
All righty. Thank you, Joe. So Murder Bookies, I know you can see why I had Joe Giacalone on the podcast discussing LISK. His expertise in investigations and the evidence in this case and the developments, it's simply unmatched. I appreciate his insights into the consequences of the decision-making that the powers that be had all those years ago when corruption was rife, and how it may very well impact the upcoming trial against Rex Heuermann. There's also the digital evidence and the internet searches and the DNA, and then trying to identify Asian dough. All of these things are factors that are impacting, plus the upcoming prosecution of Andrew Dykes for the murder of Tanya Jackson. All of this may impact securing justice for the victims, the murdered women whose lives were stolen and have to remain center in this case. So next week, on March 17th, 2026, Rex Heuermann is scheduled to be back in court. Then we will start the long slog leading to September, where the trial is supposed to take place, unless, of course, some kind of plea deal is worked out. So I'm curious, do you think Rex Heuermann is going to consider a plea or not? What do you think, Murder Bookies? All right, be sure to check out True Crime with the Sarge on YouTube or True Crime with the Sarge audio files. Thank you for listening. I truly appreciate you joining me on this journey. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it with family and friends and leave a positive 5-star review. You can contact me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com or connect with me on X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Additionally, you can always join my Patreon for $2 to $4 a month and help me choose the next book that I'll feature. My next episode will be out in no time, so I will see you then, Murder Bookies. Always trust your gut. Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.